We've been talking about Graham Plattner and him dropping out of the race in Maine. Removing a candidate from the ballot is kind of a big deal, and that's why we're talking about it. And that's why we have Hans von Spakovsky here to talk legal with us, Advancing American Freedom, senior legal fellow and frequent guest with the Annie Frey Show. Hi, Hans.
Hey, Ryan. How are you doing?
Great. Great to talk to you again, as we always do, and I'm always in the room listening to you guys talk. However, I don't usually ask a whole lot of questions of you because Annie does a good job, but I do want to talk about Graham Plattner with you a little bit. This one seems like it's a little easier case because they sort of pressured him out. But now what happens in Maine, and is it different in every state, or is this kind of the same thing we saw federally when they removed Joe Biden?
Well, the rules differ from state to state, but most of them are pretty much the same. If a nominee is a slot becomes vacant because the nominees resigned or died or anything like that, it's too late to hold another primary. So most states, and this is the case in Maine, the law actually gives the Maine Democrats State Committee. So this is the committee that basically runs the party. They have the authority to name a replacement. So it's basically all the members of the state committee who choose who the new nominee is going to be. And in Maine, the deadline for them to tell the Secretary of State is the fourth Monday of July, which by my calculations, July 27th. So they got to pick somebody by then. That may seem like an early deadline, but remember, they have to design the ballot, put all the names for all the different offices on there. Then it has to be approved. Then it has to go out to a printer so they can print many, many copies of it. And remember, early voting in Maine starts on October 5th. So those are the deadlines that they've got to work with.
Okay, so that was why these dates are so important. I kept hearing, they got to do it soon if they're going to do it. But what happens if, hypothetically, a candidate could drop out after that date or could die or something after that date? Would they just have to figure it out? If they got the ballots all printed, what do they do?
They're still on the ballot.
Oh, they're still on it. So you can't remove them at that point.
No, you can't remove them at that point. And I'd have to jog my memory, but it seems to me, I think didn't that happen in Missouri?
Yeah, with Mel Carnahan.
Many, many years ago, it was the death was so late that the name was still on the ballot.
Yeah, and I think they said ahead of time, well, if you vote for Mel Carnahan, you'll be voting for his wife at that point, which is ultimately what happened. And he did win, right, and then she won. So I guess a similar thing would happen in this case. They would just say, well, if you vote for Graham Plattner, you're actually voting for Janet Mills or whatever. Something like that. Right. So is this very similar, Hans, to what happened with Joe Biden just 2 years ago and Kamala Harris, where it was so close and they were at the nominating convention that they had to do it quickly like that?
Yes, that's exactly what happened. And look, he may have been forced out, but he actually resigned. Remember, he took himself out of the race. And that's when the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, which controls the Democratic Party, had the ability to name a replacement. And of course, they named Kamala Harris. All of that was done quickly in order that states all over the country would be able to replace her name on the ballots for the November election.
Hans, I want to switch gears a little bit here and talk about a subject that you have talked about with Annie, but just kind of rehash a little bit since we're past the Supreme Court session now. I look back on this session and see basically just that marquee decision about birthright citizenship, and I go, this one wasn't great for conservatives. But when I talk to Mark Cox in the morning, who you know very well as well, he goes, no, man, you got to really look at the big picture here. How do you, Hans, view that decision session? Was it a pretty mixed bag, or was it good for Trump and conservatives?
Look, that birthright citizenship case was a huge disappointment and probably one of the biggest mistakes the Supreme Court has ever made. But when you look at all of the cases, and remember there were, I think, upwards of 80 different decisions, it was actually a big win for conservatives and those who believe actually in the Constitution and the rule of law. In case after case after case, they made a good ruling. I mean, look, think on the very same day as the birthright citizenship case, they released a decision saying it's perfectly legal for states to protect girls and women by preventing biological males from participating in girl and women's athletics. That was the same day. That decision protected girls and women all across the country, not only their safety, but also their ability to compete. And for example, if you're in high school, try to get scholarships to help pay for college.
Yeah, that is a huge ruling. I think I forget about that one because it was the same day as birthright citizenship,
right.
and it didn't get the attention that birthright citizenship did. But I want to ask, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here a little bit, but is there anything from, you said 80 decisions there. Is there anything that we as media people are kind of overlooking? There's, you had the marquee ones, you had the headline ones, but is there anything that we missed that you're like, oh, this one actually needs more attention because it was a really good or conversely really bad decision that's going to impact us in ways that maybe we don't know yet?
Well, given that we were just talking about the elections in May and we have elections coming up in November, the other big disappointment was the decision they released saying, and again, unfortunately, this was Amy Coney Barrett once again joining with the Chief Justice and saying that it's okay for states to allow mail-in or absentee ballots to come in after Election Day and to keep counting them. That affects a large number of states across the country. It leads to huge delays in us finding out who won an election, and it provides all kinds of opportunities, frankly, for confusion, and I think opportunities for fraud that could have ended if they had come out with the correct decision. This was not the correct decision.
So they basically deferred to the states on that, and that seems to be, from my recollection, what they're, even somebody like Barrett, who she said, well, it's sort of not my role. It's more the state's role to do this. Is that right?
Well, yeah, except that, remember, what they were arguing about was the federal statutes that set the date for the federal election.
Yeah.
And the whole claim was that, look, those laws say that the federal election day is the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. And by the end of that day, election day, all the ballots need to be in the hands of election officials. So her saying that, oh, no, that's not what it means, and it's okay for states to continue to allow ballots to come in, I think she misread that statute.
It sounds like it. I mean, that sounds like it's real easy to say, well, election day ends on election day. So there's not really a lot of room for error there. I'm glad you brought this up, Hans, because I do have one more question before we get to the end of the segment, run out of time here. As we've talked about that ruling, that one about accepting ballots late, the SAVE Act came up again. And talking about the Republicans trying to get this thing through, it's still there. It's not going away. Maybe they actually do have enough to get this thing over the line, especially with reconciliation. Would the SAVE Act address that, or are they kind of fitting it in so that it does address these ballots coming in late?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, the main part of the bill is requiring an ID in every state and requiring proof of citizenship. But there's also provision in there saying absentee ballots are supposed to be in by the end of Election Day.
Fantastic. Any prognosis on that? I mean, any update on, do you think we're getting closer here on that?
Well, Speaker Johnson, has said they're not only going to attach it to the third reconciliation bill, but every must-pass bill from now on. If he follows through with that, then maybe we have a chance of getting it through the Senate.
Okay. I guess that's one of the reasons we're all watching Mitch McConnell too now, is to wonder, because he's been one of the voices who's been against it. So we'll see what happens there. Hans, thank you so much for your expertise as usual and your time. Advancing American Freedom Senior Legal Fellow Hans von Spakovsky. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Ron.
All right. We'll talk to you next time. I'll be in the room anyway. I usually am here listening to those interviews because Hans always knows what he's talking about.